Hello folks, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have another book review for you, and this one is maybe one of the most impactful books I've read. It is Trauma and Recovery in the Aftermath of Violence by Judith Herman. Where to even begin with this book? If you are at all someone who has experienced or lived through traumatic life events, or if you are interested in working with survivors of trauma in any field at all, this book should probably be at the top of your to-read list. And I know a lot of people talk about the Body Keeps Score and other collections of work on PTSD and trauma. I can say with so much confidence after reading Trauma and Recovery that this is the book where people should be starting. Judith does an incredible job of breaking down different types of trauma that someone can go through, from PTSD due to war, due to domestic violence, due to political terror, and interlinks all of them and the different ways in which they affect the mind, they affect the body, and they affect a survivor's life. All of this book is incredibly thoughtfully well researched, with so many different studies and modalities and approaches to trauma care, research, and treatment cited. And she does a great job of breaking down the history of trauma research and care and why we as a culture continually keep looking at trauma and being so horrified at what we find that we turn away from it, sometimes for decades at a time, before the mental health industry begins to work with trauma again anew. The reviews for this book constantly have people talking about the way it literally was a gut punch of a wake-up call for things that they'd experienced in their life and healing that they needed to undergo. And they are not kidding. No matter who you are, no matter what life you've had, this book will at some point hit you with a big impact of how trauma, all sorts of trauma that we experience in our lives, impact our minds and our day-to-day interactions. She starts the book with a very good breakdown of different types of trauma, how they occur, and what their effects on the brain and body are, before starting to look into how we actually heal from trauma and the different stages that someone goes through, especially survivors of prolonged traumatic experience, such as CPTSD due to abusive relationships, domestic violence, and childhood abuse. The book first may seem a little discouraging as you learn all of these ways that trauma just kind of undoes your body and your brain, but then she beautifully lays out a 3-step path to recovery with incredible detail on each stage as how mental health professionals can support survivors through healing and overcoming these traumatic experiences. And the advice she gives in this book is not just good for mental health professionals. Anyone who works with victims or survivors of trauma could definitely benefit from reading this and having a better understanding of how to work with people who are survivors of trauma. As a professional body piercer, I feel like if you have any interest in doing trauma-informed or affirming body piercings, this is something that you have to read in order to understand how to work with these clients well and safely. For me, what stood out the most was her discussion of communication and the way particularly persistent and repeat trauma, such as abuse that occurs in relationships, breaks down people's senses of how to communicate with others and how to even communicate with themselves as individuals. As someone who does try and do a lot of trauma-informed work and who does work a lot with gender-affirming piercings and other identity-affirming piercings, I've definitely had a lot of experiences in the piercing room where communication about specific things did become difficult either for the client or for myself to make sure that we were being heard and on the same page. Especially in the moments of intensity that surround a piercing, there is so much vulnerability that I've watched it kind of cause clients to recede a little bit mentally and have maybe some things brought up for them. It can trigger some memories. It can trigger some big emotional responses. I've had clients who find a very difficult time articulating what is going on in their mind and their body as they are sitting here sobbing after a simple piercing and saying, "It doesn't even hurt. I'm just so emotional all of a sudden." And reading this book helped me understand the type of emotions we are unlocking when we are doing piercings and having these experiences with clients, and how to better show up and hold space for my clients to ensure that they can have these emotions in a safe and non-judgmental place, and to ensure that I can offer guidance that will actually be beneficial to them having an overall positive outcome from the experience that they're having in the piercing room. She breaks down healing from trauma into 3 stages: safety, rememberment and mourning, and reintroduction into life. And depending on where a survivor is in their own healing process, depends on what type of assistance is going to be most beneficial for them. And survivors may oscillate between different stages of recovery as they process different elements of the trauma or as new things come up from them. The type of experience that people can have in the piercing room, which can sometimes unlock deep or neglected wells of emotional, physical, or mental trauma, can completely bring someone all the way back to stage 1, or can push someone to rapidly ascend to stage 3 because of what they've unlocked in that experience. And reading this book, learning about these stages of trauma healing, and more importantly, how to support someone differently through each stage, and concrete examples of how to talk to someone, the type of support someone might need, and the ways in which systems fail survivors in each of these stages of recovery was so beneficial to me. Not just me personally, like understanding my own healing path through trauma, because I'm gonna be real, I picked up this book because my therapist recommended it for me as a survivor of domestic violence, and this book has been calling me by my full government name the entire time, but also for me as a piercer, to really learn how to better assess what point in recovery my clients are at when they're coming into me, and understand how to talk with them about these things, how to hold space, how to be there to encourage remembrance and mourning if that's what's coming up for them in the piercing room, how to create a space that's focused on safety and consent if they're coming to me earlier in the process. I cannot say enough good things about this book, especially if you have any interest in doing trauma-informed work or working with survivors. This is an absolute must-read. Last week's video was all about what it actually means to be a trauma-informed piercer, and I really wanted to encourage more piercers to get more education to offer trauma-informed work in a more ethical, more educated, more thorough way than I feel like we as an industry currently do. And it is my sincere hope that in suggesting this book and others like this, I can help piercers, tattoo artists, apprentices, front of house, anyone in the industry feel much better equipped to work with survivors of trauma. I am adding an entire section to my media list dedicated to trauma-informed work, and you will find trauma and recovery right at the top of this list. It is quite literally that good. This book changed my life, and if you have any hesitations or doubts about picking it up and reading it, please don't. Please just get it. I have no doubt it will change your life too. All right, folks, thanks so much for sitting down and chatting, and I can't wait to talk with you again soon. Bye.